Wadr, promoting dialogue.
Good evening and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. Here are the top stories. UNOWAS warns of escalating terrorist activity and humanitarian crisis in West Africa.
Terrorist activity has surged in scale, complexity, and sophistication, including through the use of drones, alternative internet communication, and increased collusion with the transnational organized crime.
Authorities in Niger closes money transfer agencies in Doso to curb illicit financing activities. Electoral umpire in Nigeria, INEC, says it is working on voting rights for prisoners.
We also brought to your attention concerns about access to our facilities for observers and the media. Political parties also want to know if they will be allowed to campaign in the correctional facilities and appoint polling agents on election day.
And Ghanaian government begins investigation surrounding the death of key officials in helicopter crash. Please stay tuned for details of the stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast. We'll begin this evening with a call from the United Nations over the worsening insecurity in West Africa and the Sahel, warning that terrorist groups are growing more sophisticated and better connected to organized crime. Briefing the UN Security Council, Leonardo Santos Simão, Special Representative of the Secretary General and Head of the United Nations Office for West Africa and Sahel, UNOWAS, said terrorist activity in the region has surged in scale, complexity, and sophistication, with militants now using drones, alternative internet communication, and forging ties with transnational organized crime. He cautioned that maritime security also remains a concern and requires a coordinated response, adding that young people are increasingly targeted for recruitment by extremist groups.
Terrorist activity has surged in scale, complexity, and sophistication, including through the use of drones, alternative internet communication, and increased collusion with the transnational organized crime. Maritime security remains a concern and requires a coordinated response. Young people are increasingly prime targets for recruitment by terrorist and violent extremist groups. Growing insecurity compounds an already dire humanitarian situation. According to our OSIWA colleagues, 12.8 million people are projected to face acute food insecurity this rainy season, and 2.6 million children are expected to suffer from severe acute malnutrition this year. Critically, only 14% of funding for the 2025 humanitarian needs and response plan for the Sahel region has been received. Resource mobilization is therefore urgently needed to save the lives of millions of people at risk.
Speaking further, Simão, however, praised ECOWAS' efforts in maintaining democracy and inclusive governance.
Despite serious challenges, we have reasons to celebrate the democratic dividends in the region. During events marking ECOWAS' 50th anniversary in Lagos on 22nd, I witnessed the organization's commitment to strengthening governance and regional integration, taking full account of the aspirations of its people, especially the youth. I also welcome ECOWAS' recent decision to establish its Economic, Social, and Cultural Council, designed to bring the voices of citizens across the region into its proceedings. In Senegal, inclusive national consultations forged consensus on institutional reforms. In Sierra Leone, stakeholders continue to implement the agreement on national unity. In Ghana, the work of National Peace Council stands as a model for national dialogue and conflict prevention. In Liberia, we praise the commitment to normalize the functioning of the Constitution after the impasse in the Parliament. In the months ahead, elections are scheduled in 3 countries. In Guinea, I welcome the commitment by the authorities to hold the elections before the end of the year, following a constitutional referendum in September this year.
Leonardo Santos Simão is a special representative of the Secretary General and head of the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel, UNOWAS. Well, still talking the Sahel, specifically Niger now, where authorities have ordered the temporary suspension of around 30 money transfer agencies in Dosso, south of the country, citing security concerns linked to illicit financing and cross-border cash flows. Sankli Janko completes the story.
The measure is signed by Regional Governor Colonel Major Bana Assassin, targets mainly the NITA and Amana operators in several towns across the departments of Dosso, Dochi, Birni, Gaya and Logo. Strategic locations such as Bolbol and Lido Dosso, Tombombuya Dochi, Kot Gaya and Bakir Tombologa are among those affected. Officials say the decision is based on the Transitional Charter of the National Council for the Safeguarding of the Fatherland, CNSP, Law 9831 on Territorial Organization and Decree 2025009 on Governor Appointments. While the decree does not specify the exact nature of the threats, security sources cite several reasons. These include risk related to the financing of illicit activities, the need to better control cross-border flows, and the prevention of economic crimes. The suspension is expected to impact remittances from migrant workers, disrupt cross-border trade with Nigeria, and stir unease among local businesses. This temporary closure could have several consequences. It risks disrupting remittances from migrant workers, affecting cross-border trade with neighboring Nigeria and sparking reactions among local economic operators.
Sankli Janko with that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Mali's National Charter for Peace and Reconciliation was unanimously approved on Thursday by the National Transitional Council during its extraordinary session. This draft charter was presented by Lieutenant General Ismail Wadr, Minister of Reconciliation, Peace and National Cohesion. On July 22, Mali adopted a National Charter for Peace and Reconciliation drawn up by a drafting commission comprising a preamble, 16 titles, 39 chapters and 106 articles. Abdullah Hassan completes the story.
The document's fundamental objectives are to restore peace, strengthen security, strengthen social cohesion, and consolidate living together through national reconciliation. According to Lieutenant General Ismail Wadr, Minister of Reconciliation and leader of the project before the National Transitional Council (NTC), the National Charter for Peace and Reconciliation is based on respect for democratic principles, the rule of law, social justice, equality of citizens, and good governance. This charter, according to the President of the Drafting Commission, stresses the need to resolve crises and conflict by favoring alternative methods and endogenous mechanisms for the prevention, management, and resolution of conflicts that have shown their effectiveness. This charter will be promulgated by the President of the Transition, Army General Assimi Goïta, in the coming days. As a reminder, this charter was initiated after the end in January 2024 of the Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation resulting from the Algiers process signed in 2015 between the authorities and the armed rebel groups in the north. Assimi Goïta has thus initiated an inter-Malian dialogue to achieve peace and engage in dialogue with all armed movements and restore a national day of forgiveness. The separatist rebel groups did not participate in the consultations or in the drafting of the Charter for Peace and Reconciliation. Among them is the OSIWA Liberation Movement, FLA.
Abdullah Hassan with that report. Let's take you now to Nigeria, where the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, says it is working with the Nigeria Correctional Service on the voting rights of inmates. INEC Chairman Mahmoud Yakubu disclosed this on Friday while receiving the Comptroller General Sylvester Nwakuche at the Commission's headquarters in Abuja. Yakubu affirmed the judgment of the appeal court granting inmates the right to register and vote in any elections.
For our part, we raised the issue of access to the correctional facilities for voter registration, creation of polling units, and voter education. On behalf of stakeholders and for transparency, we also brought to your attention concerns about access to our facilities for observers and the media. Political parties also want to know if they will be allowed to campaign in the correctional facilities and appoint polling agents on election day. We believe that working together with you and the stakeholders, we can address these concerns. As we are aware, election is a process governed by law. Again, working together, we can seize the opportunity of the ongoing electoral reform for a clear legal provision that will specifically cover citizens serving time in our correctional facilities.
For his part, the Comptroller General of Nigeria Correctional Service, Sylvester Nwakuche, revealed that there are over 81,000 inmates across the correctional centers, and about 66% of them are awaiting trials. The Comptroller General also cited a recent court ruling that upheld the rights of inmates, especially those who are awaiting trials, to vote in an election.
The inmates of this great nation, I represent them as the Comptroller General of Corrections. Over 81,000 of them, of which over 66% are awaiting trial persons who are presumed innocent until proven guilty. Even while as convicts or awaiting trial persons, they do have rights. And part of those rights are rights I'm here this morning to discuss with the INEC chairman to see how we can, if possible, extend some of these rights to these inmates. And this right is about voting rights, my prof. Sir.
Recall in 2019, a court appeal sitting in Benin, Edo State, South Nigeria, affirmed the rights of inmates across the country to vote. Meanwhile, the main opposition party in Nigeria, the People's Democratic Party, PDP, has warned members supporting incumbent President Bola Tinubu to reverse their stance or face stiffer sanctions. In a statement on Friday, the party's National Publicity Secretary, Debo Olugunganagba, described such actions as anti-party and a violation of the PDP constitution. Citing Section 59, the NWC issued a strong reprimand, urging those involved to retrace a step to protect the party's unity and electoral fortunes. The PDP leadership expressed dismay at public statements by prominent members openly declaring support for the All Progressives Congress and Tinubu's 2027 re-election bid. Recall on July 28, former Southwest Ekiti State Governor Ayodele Fayose endorsed the president for a second term. Amid the internal crisis, the National Working Committee called on members to remain loyal and focus ahead of the PDP National Convention scheduled for November 15 to 16, 2025 in Ibadan. In Cote d'Ivoire, the leader of the opposition PDCI party has emphasized the need for a dialogue in the country ahead of the October presidential election. The Janjam made a call during a video broadcast via social media accounts in commemoration of the country's 65th independence anniversary. He denounced the wave of arrests, intimidation, and suppression of political and civil rights activists by the current regime. Jam's message on Thursday evening came nearly 24 hours after incumbent Alassane Ouattara addressed the nation on the occasion of Cote d'Ivoire's Independence Day. President Ouattara in his speech highlighted some of his government's achievements, including a thriving economy and social security, as he solicited support for his fourth-term candidacy. In response to the speech, the Janjam warns of the dangerous path the ruling RHDP party's decision leads the country and threatens regional peace.
À moins de 3 mois d'une élection décisive pour l'avenir de notre pays.
Less than 3 months before an election that will be decisive for the future of our country, it is the House of Côte d'Ivoire that is threatened, and potentially the sub-region if we do not stop the infernal machine of exclusion, arrests, intimidation, and withdrawal into identity. Felix Boani made our beautiful country the land of dialogue. He succeeded through patience, intelligence, tenacity, and also one of his greatest qualities, his precious humility in ensuring that this word, dialogue, was almost automatically associated with our country throughout his period in power. Dialogue and peace, words blessed above all others, whether for international issues as complex as the Middle East conflict or even some of our internal difficulties. It is not too late to prevent our country from reliving a recent past that all Ivorians want to forget. The PDCI, with my voice aside, is committed to continuing always to working for peace, for dialogue, to build a Côte d'Ivoire faithful to the original vision of President Félix Boigny. I remain optimistic, convinced as I am that the best days of our country are yet to come, with a president elected during an inclusive, honest, transparent election organized in true peace for united, feasible, tolerant, and fraternal Côte d'Ivoire.
Paisible, tolérante et fraternelle.
Tijan Cham is the leader of the opposition PDCI party in Côte d'Ivoire. In the meantime, the trial of former Chadian Prime Minister and Transformers party leader Succès Masra entered its third day on Friday in N'Djamena. Well, Christopher Ticho brings us the proceedings in this report.
The proceedings are tied to the Mandakau massacre of May 14, 2025, in which more than 70 men stand accused of involvement. Masra faces charges of disseminating racist and xenophobic messages, murder and criminal conspiracy. Detained for over 2 months, Masra was heard for the first time on Thursday. He rejected all accusations and on Friday morning faced questioning from both the court and the state lawyers, who have joined the case as a civil party. Dressed in white traditional attire, Masra alternated between calm explanations and passionate rebuttals, at times raising his arms to the sky to emphasize his points. Proceedings paused late in the morning and resumed at 2 p.m. with closing arguments. The presiding judge and state lawyers tried to shorten Masra's testimony to speed up the trial, prompting objections from the defense. The defense insists it is calm and relieved, arguing that no new evidence has been presented to link Masra directly to the Mandakau event.
Christopher Chicho filed that report. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. UNOAS warns of escalating terrorist activity and humanitarian crisis in West Africa. Authorities in Niger closes money transfer agencies in Dosso to curb illicit financial activities. Electoral umpire in Nigeria, INEC, says it is working on voting rights for prisoners. And still ahead in the news, Ghanaian government begins investigation surrounding the death of key officials in helicopter crash. We don't have a guest interview on that and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
We are streaming live on wadr.org and also follow live streaming on YouTube and Facebook. Let's cross over now to Ghana, where the government is investigating circumstances surrounding the military helicopter crash that resulted in the death of 8 people, including 2 cabinet ministers and other officials. In his address to the nation on Thursday night regarding the situation, President Mahama reassured families of the victims and the public that the Ghana Armed Forces is conducting a transparent investigation into the incident. The military helicopter crash occurred on Wednesday, August 6, while en route to Obuasi in the Ashanti region for a specific assignment. 8 people were on board, including the Minister of Defense, Dr. Edward Omane-Boama, the Minister of Environment, Science and Technology, Ibrahim Murtala Mohammed, as well as 3 crew members from the Ghana Armed Forces, among others. WDL's 983 in Accra reports that the helicopter lost radar contact shortly after takeoff.
President John Dramani Mahama has assured Ghanaians of a full-scale transparent investigation into the military helicopter crash that killed 8 people on board, including state officials and military personnel. The crash occurred at the Adansi-Ekrofom district of the Ashanti region. In his address on Thursday, President Mahama described the tragedy as a devastating blow not only to the state, but to him personally.
This tragedy represents a deep personal loss for me. I shared a close bond with many of those individuals who died. Our nation is grieving, and on behalf of the government and the people of Ghana, I extend my deepest condolences to their families, friends, and their loved ones. Know that our entire country mourns with you.
President Mahama disclosed that both the flight data and cockpit voice recorders had been recovered and that the Ghana Armed Forces had launched a comprehensive investigation to determine the cause of the incident.
And as we mourn, questions about the cause of this tragedy are only natural and important. And I want to assure the families and the nation that the Ghana Armed Forces has initiated a full and transparent investigation into the circumstances of this crash. An investigative board of inquiry has been set up to investigate the cause of the crash.
All 8 bodies have been retrieved and samples of the remains have been flown to South Africa for DNA confirmation to aid identification. The president called for unity in this time of grief.
Let us set aside our differences and offer our collective compassion to the bereaved families.
As part of a week-long program of national mourning, a state funeral will be held at the Black Star Square on Friday, August 15, in memory of the deceased personalities. On Saturday, August 9, the forecourts of the State House will host an evening of reflections and a memorial, while books of condolences will be opened from August 10 to 14 at the Ministries of Defense, Environment and Foreign Affairs, the Ghana Armed Forces and NADMO, as well as the headquarters of the National Democratic Congress. For WEDR, Nadi Teti, Accra.
Elsewhere in Liberia, thousands of citizens converge in Monrovia to protest the alarming rise of drug and substance abuse across the country. The demonstration held under the banner Say No to Drugs brought together people from all walks of life with the shared goal of petitioning the current government over its 2023 election campaign promise to tackle the drug crisis. President Joseph Boakai had, during his first State of the Nation address, declared drug abuse a public health emergency and established a task force to address the issue. As WDL's Abraham Parker reports, the protesters decry the ineffectiveness of the anti-drugs campaign.
Representing a coalition on the banner Say No to Drugs were members of civil society, private institutions, government officials, and citizens. In a petition read by Anthony Nimlin, one of the protesters, the campaigners called on the government to institute measures to end the drug epidemic and protect the youth.
We see parents bury their children as a result of drugs overdose. A crowd every day as their children roam the streets, begging and stealing just to feed an addiction they cannot control. This has become the new normal in Liberia. Battling and overcoming addiction is one of the most difficult things to do.
A strong critic of the Boakai government, Representative Safoko of District 9, Moserado County, criticized the government for politicizing the societal problem.
The president told the Liberian people that any government official who was going to be appointed was going to do his or her job test. So that was another mockery. Then I saw that the government did not have a systematic approach towards drugs.
In response, Representative Prince Toss, committee chairman on claims and petition at the House of Representatives, assured the protesters of the legislature's commitment to address the crisis. It should be recalled that under the immediate past administration of George Weah, the Controlled Drug and Substance Act of 2023 was enacted, making drug offenses non-bailable. Despite these efforts, drug abuse, particularly of crude, remains a public concern in Liberia, resulting in several deaths and an increased rate of mental illness. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, in this segment, we stay in Ghana, where the government is investigating the circumstances surrounding a military helicopter crash that resulted in the death of 8 people, including 2 cabinet ministers and other officials. In his address to the nation on Thursday night regarding the situation, President Mahama reassured families of the victims and the Ghana and that the armed forces is conducting a transparent investigation into the incident. Our guest is Dr. Dominic Ando, lead consultant at Aviation Ghana.
When it comes to civilian crash investigations, in Ghana, we have the Civil Aviation Authority, just like we have in Senegal. And then we also have another agency called the Aircraft Accident and Incident Investigation Bureau. So the Aircraft Accident and Incident Investigation Bureau, short form is AIB. They are responsible for investigating all civilian aircraft when they are involved in accidents or incidents. When it comes to the military, because it's military-oriented, in this instance where the helicopter crashed, they have their own ANS services, they have their own air traffic controllers, etc. So it's the military high command that will set up a committee made up of the Chief of Air Staff, Chief of Defense Staff, and some other experts to look into what actually caused the crash. If the government also wants a very open and transparent process, government may also suggest that, look, add this retired officer to the investigations because they think that he will bring a fresh perspective to bear, and because it's not an active service, is free to express his opinion. They may recommend some of those to be added as well. But it will not take the form of the civilian investigations that AIB they will do. But the military will set up the committee and government will recommend 1 or 2 people to be added to the committee.
How important is the recovery and analysis of the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder in determining the cause of such crashes?
When it comes to helicopters, because there are a lot of risk factors, weather being one, thunderstorms and rains being the other, and the August weather in Ghana generally is very cloudy and cold and drizzles a lot. So August temperatures in Ghana is about 23 degrees Celsius. It's the coolest weather month in Ghana. So the weather itself generally is always cloudy and etc. in August. So the first risk that may have causes that we talk about is the weather. However, the flight data recorder, the black box as we call it, will help us understand if indeed they had mechanical issues on board, or if it was the weather, or was a discussion ongoing between the crew just before the crash happened, and probably if they had issues along the way, the flight data recorder will point to all that. If there was some malfunctioning on the equipment, the aircraft, the helicopter, it will record that. If the pilot was saying I have this issue, for which reason I need to land, and I was looking for a place to land, it will record that. Bear in mind that the accident happened in the forest, and around that side, it was very difficult to say you are navigating the forest and find a place to land. So if all the issues taken into consideration, the flight data recorder will let us understand better what actually transpired on the aircraft.
So you've just mentioned weather condition being a factor, but what role do other factors like maintenance history, pilot training typically play in similar military helicopter accidents?
Well, you see, the major issue when it has to do with helicopters has to do with weather. Yes, maintenance is part, training is part, because when it comes to maintenance, from the Air Force base, if the equipment, the helicopter, is not fit to fly, the engineer will never certify it to take off. Once they...
Dr. Dominic Ando, lead consultant at Aviation Ghana. In sport news, the refugee athlete team will compete at the World Athletics Championship in Tokyo from 17 to 25th August 2025, with 6 representatives bringing hope to millions of displaced people. 6 refugee athletes will represent them in the women's race. Farida Abaroge in 5,000 meters, an Ethiopian refugee living in France, and Perina Lokure Nagang, 800 meters base in Kenya, will be on the starting line. Abaroge fled her country in 2016 and competed in the Paris 2024 Olympics, while Nakang is returning after a difficult year marked by illness and social crisis. Meanwhile, the 4th day of the Under-20 Women's African Nations Championship played on Thursday in Yaoundé, Cameroon, confirmed the ambitions of Cameroon, Kenya and Senegal in the tournament, which is held from August 4 to 10. The 2025 Women's Under-20 Nations currently underway enjoyed a day of intense action on Thursday with 3 clear victories that redefine ambitions. Host nation Cameroon pressed against Uganda, winning 3-0 in a controlled display supported by their home crowd. And of course, another key match, Kenya dominated Egypt in a close match 3-1, despite losing the second set after a long arm wrestle. The Kenyans thus bounced back after their defeat against Cameroon the day before. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Sheikh Jai for the technical support. Do keep the conversation coming on all of our social media platforms: X, Instagram at WDR English, and Facebook WDR English Service. I am Imo Edet. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Imi FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Nibe County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Baf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and